sound better? Had to make some adjustments, so hopefully this will be working better in a second. How's the sound now? Here. Yeah, I forgot to plug in the USB. It likes to overheat. Let's see if the camera looks okay. Always an issue. So I'm setting up something over here, just cleaning up my mess. So give me 2 seconds to get this out of the way and center it so it doesn't look like it's cockeyed. Okay, so I had a couple questions this week. People wanted to know if you could use the TFT with the rep wrap or you needed a parallel cable. So if you have questions, put them in the chat and I'll take a look as I go. But let's see what we got here. So we have a SKR 1.4 and we have a Big Tree Tech TFT E3 version 3.0. Now, there are a couple of issues I'm still trying to work out with what can show up. So hopefully we can try out fans today with it. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect the TFT like we normally would, and then we're going to double check what the actual configuration is. So on the back of this one it says RS232. So that's the one you want. The other one is an SWD port. That's for programming. But if we program, we're going to actually use the SD card. Next, we have to figure out how to connect this. So we're going to go over to the browser real quick and see what's going on. So over on the browser, as soon as I get it up in front of me here, 2 seconds. So on the browser, we're going to search for the TFT display. So I just have to make sure I'm seeing it. So let's get this over here. So here is the actual display. There's a little cheat sheet on their website. This is for the SKR 1.4 up here. And then the TFT port, we need to know where the reset is. So 0 is our actual second serial port, and our board's -1. So I'm going to go over to the browser in a second, or not the browser, pardon me. I'm going to go over to VS Code. So let's see what we got here. So in VS Code, I've already downloaded the actual firmware and extracted it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to show you how to open it if you haven't seen this before. So let me fix my display. There we go. So I'm going to click. Hang on a second. There we go. I'm going to click on the actual display that we see. Hang on, I got to move stuff over here. And you're seeing my actual background. So give me a second to fix this. There we go. So I'm going to click over here for Explorer, open folder. I'm going to go to my downloads folder, Marlin 2.0, Marlin 2.0, and I'm going to select the folder. So I'm going to configure some of the stuff very quickly. So to start with, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to the Marlin folder, the source folder, the core folder, and boards.h. We'll search on SKR _1.4. It's a turbo, so I can't use this one up here, but I can use the one down here. So I'm going to highlight that, copy it, minimize core and source, close out of boards, go to Marlin configuration.h, search on motherboard, paste it over where the ramps is. Then I'm going to go up here, I'm going to change the first serial port to -1. I'm going to remove the comment on the second one, and I'm going to set that to 0. Then we have to set our stepper real quick here, so I'm going to search on the A4988. I'm going to remove the comment for the X stepper. Then I'm going to change it to TMC 2209. And then I'm going to go down here and just point out that this is used for your normal steps as the default. This may vary depending upon your configuration. So let's go over to configuration.h, search on 800. And here is our current configuration for this stepper being a TMC 2209. We need to set up debug, so we're going to do TMC _debug. And we're going to remove the comment for monitor driver status. This way we can use the G codes for M122. Then we're going to find the next one and enable that as well. So TMC debug. And as you can see, they talk about the G code again. Then we're going to search on sensorless homing. So I'm going to do sensorless. And I'm going to have to go up a little. There we go. So I'll remove the comment there. The default is actually going to be about 125. This may vary depending upon your current and stuff like that. Other people, because I'm working at 12 volts, will change their power supply. So there is something I want to point out, because a lot of people are now starting to upgrade with the Creality. So that's actually 24 volts. So I'm going to search on 12 volts. And it's going to be around here someplace. Here it is. So in here, you may want to modify your actual setting. This is for chopper default. So if you were to use Stealth Chop, you may want to change to 24 for your default. I'm using 12 currently. That's why I'm not changing it. But that'll optimize the usage of it when you're using spread cycle chopper. Notice how I don't talk about spread cycle, but you have to disable these to use spread cycle. So if you were to use spread cycle, you would do this, and comment it out. But we're not doing that, so we're going to skip that for now. So now that we've got everything configured there, we have to go over to platformio.ini, and we have to double check our default environment. And so the way you can do that for this board is go to core source boards.h, look at the category it's under. In this case, it's LPC 1769. So we're going to copy that. Then we'll go back to platformio.ini and we'll paste it right here. So now this is all set. We should do a clean, and the reason that I talk about this all the time is it's probably going to fail because they have something out of order in the actual build. So right now it's set to a Mega 2560. We don't want to use that. So we're going to clean it out. And so this will remove it from our actual initial setup. Now we're going to click the checkbox to actually build it. And once this is built, we're actually going to load it manually, because I was working on the actual board last night with one of the viewers and it didn't work out very well. So I changed something that knocked out the USB, or excuse me, the SD. So it's on the USB that you see it. So we have to build the second time because something is amiss. So let's click on that and see if it works. Otherwise, we got to troubleshoot what the actual issue is. So that looks like it's doing better. You can check on the progress of it in the .pio. You can see there's a build folder now, the actual chipset, and this will start to populate with our actual build. So once this is done, I'm going to go over and show you how to manually recover from what I did wrong last night. So if we go over to the workbench for a second, you can see that I have the board here. I actually have a ruler out because I was working on something. But we also need to connect this, and we need to know where the reset pin is. And of course, me not paying attention, I think the reset button is over here. You shouldn't plug this in while it's powered, but I got it right. So we're going to pop this drive out. We're going to pop it in here. Notice how I have the power all set up, even though my hand's covering it. So I'm going to place this in the actual computer. And you can see that I have ferrule connectors on here for safety. And I've marked on top the actual coloration. Red is voltage, no mark is actual ground. So that way when I'm working with it, I can tell what I'm working with. So now that I have the actual computer having the USB drive with the SD card, we're going to go back over to the desktop for a second here on the computer. And we're going to right click on firmware.bin and we're going to say reveal in Explorer. Once this pops up in Explorer, we're going to right click again, and I'll show you why. Right now we just have firmware.cur, which was last night's load. So we want to go back over here. We want to right click on this and send it to the drive. So we're all set there. Now we're going to, whoop, you didn't see anything I did. That's awesome. Hang on a second. So let me go back and show you what I was doing here. So originally I right clicked on here, revealed in Explorer, then I right click again and I send it to my E drive. Now on my E drive currently there's the firmware.bin, which is the binary file for loading. So I'm going to delete that for a second just so you can see the cause and effect. So I'm going to right click on firmware.bin and I'm going to send it to the E drive. Now it's over here. So let's go back over to the desktop, pop this out, and we're going to pop this in. There is a step I forgot to do with the actual setup of the LCD, but I'll show you that in a second. So that's now in there, so I'm going to plug this in. It's set to USB at the moment for power, so we're going to have to move this in a second, but I'm letting the firmware load. So now that that's complete, I'm going to unplug this for a second and move it over to the jumper power for direct power, which is not plugged in at the moment, and plug this back in. So you'll see no response. So this is the TMC 2209, and up here we have our actual extruder, or excuse me, not our extruder, our X axis. So what I'm going to do is power this up as soon as I find the cord. So here it is. It will power on in a second. And I'll check on the chat while that's going on. And I know there's a reflection. Installing the drivers, the screen installation. For 1.4, I made something a long time ago, maybe. I'd have to look, but it's essentially a different LCD in that case for touchscreen. I believe it does work. I might be able to try it out in a couple minutes. So let's try this out real quick. So let me go back and see where we are. Okay, so we have our display. And inside the display, we're going to go to menu. Then we're going to go to movement. I'm guessing it's here. And we're just going to check to see if it works. So we're going to move the X. It's moving very slightly, so I'm going to increase it to 10. And you can see now that it's moving what it thinks is 10 millimeters. So now let's see if we can home it. So we're just going to home the X axis. Okay, that seems to work. So I'm going to move this back over into the middle. Okay, now I'm going to switch to the other one. So I'm going to hold this down. I'm going to switch over to Marlin, click again, and now Marlin mode will come up if it is set up, which currently it is not. So we'll wait. And nothing happens. So we know that possibly it's because we didn't connect EXP1 and 2 to the board. So let's first try that. So I'm going to disconnect this. So it's powered down. I'm going to take a cable and I'm going to stick it right here. This is EXP2, and I'm going to connect EXP2 over here. So we got that done. So let's do EXP1 real quick. It's a notch connector again. And then we'll do EXP1 over here. And we'll power this back up and see if Marlin mode works. It probably will not. So it's not showing anything. So we have to go back over to the computer and set this up. So I'm going to remove the power for a second, pop the drive, or actually I'm just going to move the jumper so I can power it this way. Hang on, I'll just disconnect this so I don't do anything wrong. And then connect this. So let's go over to the VS Code for a second. Inside VS Code, we're going to go to configuration.h. We'll scroll to the top for a second. We'll search on SD and LCD or SD support. I'm not sure which. There we go. So LCD and SD support. So over here you have your language. This is for a certain type of display, not the TFT. That's slightly different. And obviously you can see that there's a bunch of languages here, like Polish or Poliska, Ruska, Français, and Deutschland is right here. So, as usual, there are different types of displays that you can use for your display character set. Normally we'd use Western, but I'm going to skip that for now. There's types of display. I'm just going to go through this quickly. These are SPI stuff, which we don't really work with in this case. Cyclical redundancy check. This checks to make sure that things are working correctly. We don't really need it at the moment. So then you have different types of display menus. Your encoder, the direction that it travels, pulses, how fast, all that stuff. It's right here. So we're only interested in the speaker at the moment, so let's just make sure that works. It may be hard to cause it to work, but it's a piezo buzzer. Just keep that in mind. They just say speaker here. So now that we got most of that configured, we're going to search on rep wrap underscore discount, and it's not this one but the next one. So it's rep wrap discount full graphics smart controller. So I'm going to remove the comment real quick here, and then I'm going to go and build it again, and hopefully we can communicate with the board. So one of the things that we can do to check this, because I know this can be somewhat of a pain, let's build that again just in case. Otherwise there's an error that I've caused and I've got to find it. That looks good at the moment. Let's see if this is working along as it should. It does look that way. So let's go find that folder. So I'm going to go to the Marlin 2.0 folder. We'll check on the build in just a second. And what I'm looking for right now is the drive. It shows up, so we're good there. So now let's go back over to VS Code. And inside VS Code, we're going to go back over here, go to bin, right click, reveal and explorer, right click again, send to the D drive. So now we can double check it. It's there already. That's good. So let's just close out of this. We'll go back over to the desktop. We'll disconnect the USB for a second, then we'll reconnect it so it loads the firmware, and we'll watch the display. And it looks like we got it now. So that's good. So it does say TMC connection error, so I'm going to power this down. I'm going to then move this over. It may still say TMC connection error when I power it back up. So I'm going to use direct power. And we'll see what happens. So it's now powering up. And doesn't say TMC connection error. So we've learned that if the power is not connected, we're going to see that. So I'm going to click to go to the menu. I'm going to go to motion. I'm going to go to main. And let's move an axis. So we'll move the x-axis. And we'll move it 10 millimeters. Whoop. So I got to turn the dial for it to move. Then if I want to go backwards, I do the other way. So we now know that. So I'll click. Let's go back. And then back again. Auto home. Let's see what we got here. So the homing works. Obviously it's probably doing a G28, but we can check that. by adding more axes, excuse me. So let's go back to main, and what we're going to do now is we're actually going to test to see if it works without the parallel cables or ribbon cables. I'm guessing this is going to be a surprise for me, so I'm going to just disconnect this and this, and we'll see what happens. Then I'll reconnect and we'll wait. And it looks like nothing's happening. So we know that might be broken, meaning it's not broken, but it's just we don't have the ribbon cables connected. So let's reattach the ribbon cables. So EXP2, EXP1, double check to make sure it's working. And it works. So the processor on here can see the board through here. So let's go back and make sure that we didn't break anything. So I have to hold this down, then turn, then click, and this will bring us back into the touchscreen mode. Inside the touchscreen mode, we can hit menu, we can go to movement, move, make it 10, and it looks like it's moving okay. So we know that's good. Let's see if we can home it. So we'll go to home, X. So that's functioning. So now as you add functionality for things like BL Touch and other things, you may see issues because all the bugs may not have been worked out yet. But that's just a quick gist of some of the questions that I got this week. There's more, but right now I'm trying to figure out a better way to present this to you. And I may create some kind of guide that I'll put on Patreon for you guys so that you can see what settings are interconnected, but it's going to take me some time to actually work out the guide for you. So let's see if we have any questions real quick. So let's see. We do have the ramps 1.4. So let's see if I can actually set that up. I don't know how easy this is going to be because I might not have everything here. It might be a ramps 1.6, but the directions are very similar. Probably the motherboard may be even similar in the actual config file. So this display might work for the parallel cables. I'm not sure if it's going to work for the TFT because I don't know the pinouts and it might be a special port. So let me grab one here. So this is a very old display, so I don't know how well it's going to work. It's the TFT 32L version 4.0. So let's see if it actually works on a ramps. So I'm going to have to get this out of the way. So let me disconnect some stuff here. And we're probably going to use a different stepper only because to set up a TMC on a ramps takes time, and I may have to solder some wires together with the resistors, so I don't want to show you me soldering in front of you. So I'm almost cleaned up. I just have to clean the board out for the stuff that I use to attach the board to the table. It's a non-conductive display stuff that I use for, well, it's used for museums. So it's not really conductive, but in the temperature I'm in right now, being, I think we're up to 70 degrees outside, it's not cooperating the way it normally does. So I have to clean it out very carefully here. So and for those that don't know, there will be something interesting coming very soon. I'm working on building it, but I'm still waiting on the parts to arrive because apparently the postal service moves extremely slow these days. But it's been in the US now for probably 2 weeks, and I can see it just sitting there. So that will be first going through Patreon, then it will be posted as a regular tutorial. So I'm looking for a board, so let's see if I found it. Let's see. We have the ramps, and that's 1.4, so it has to be 12 volts on this particular board. So I'm going to apply some stuff just to make it easier to work with on the table. This may take a few seconds. There we go. And let me see where I am on the table. So I believe I have the X stepper already installed here. And the firmware on what I'm using is going to be probably not for the, the firmware that I'm using for this board might be a little different. Meaning that I'm going to still use the 32-bit software, but it's not 32 in this case, it's going to be 8. So I have to look at this because it's been a while. One of these two I need to connect 2 of these. Hang on a second. So I've got to actually modify my power supply for a second. So on the power supply, depending upon your country, the steps may vary. So you're probably not going to be able to see this right now because I don't have the real estate, but I got to hook up 2 connections to it and turn the camera back on. And hopefully I'll have that fixed soon too. But I'm waiting on the parts I'm going to order for that. So let me get the power supply set here off camera. I only have 1 port on the power supply. That's why I had to modify it real quick here. So we're going to have to connect connectors again. In this case, I marked the dark connectors on this as ground. And this pops out, hopefully. So I need to put it in here. So I'm going to use my ferrule connectors again. So I'm going to slide them in like so. And then I'm going to tighten them down. This is for safety of you and your hardware, so I suggest using it. So now I got a second one I'm going to do. So essentially it's the same process. Make sure that you have the right color wires going to the right color things. Connect it again, and we'll double check to make sure that we're doing this right. Okay, so I'm going to plug this in. You can see negative on the board, hopefully, but we'll look at the pinout diagram to verify before we apply any power to that. So let's double check that real quick. So if we go over to the desktop, I'm going to bring up the browser for a second. So on the browser, I'm going to search on ramps 1.4 pinout. So right here, you can see that there's a pinout diagram. And this diagram is probably a little bit fuzzy, but you can see that it's negative, positive, negative, positive. So we're good there. So let's go back over here to VS Code, and we're going to make a couple of quick mods, obviously. So I'm going to go into configuration.h. I'm going to leave this enabled. Well, no, I'm going to disable this. So let's just back out of all the changes. So I'm hitting Control Z. It brings us back to our motherboard. Up here, though, this is set to 0, which is probably what we're going to need. Down below, though, we have to search on the A4988, and we need to remove the comment, and we're going to be using a A4988 in this case. Hopefully it's functional. So now that that's set, let's go back over to configuration.h and let's remove all the changes here. So as you can see, everything is undone, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's go back over to configuration.h and double check a couple things. So it looks like it's good. I don't think there's much I need to change, but we do have to go over to platformio.ini and back out of our changes there to the Mega 2560 chipset. So that's now set. Now before we build it, we've got to obviously clean it. So let's click the garbage can, and then we're going to click build first and see what happens. It may fail. And I'll check on the chat while that's going on. Okay. So we're done with the build. Let's try doing an upload, but we need to connect the USB. So I'm going to go over to the bench for a second. I'm going to plug it in. And then I'm going to go back over to VS Code, because this is 8-bit, and I'm going to do upload. And we'll see if this actually works. It should build a lot quicker, but there seems to be some kind of failure. So let's see. The access is denied. Let's try that again. So it looks like there's a COM port open. So let's see if we can figure out what that is. This might be a little bit of a pain. So if we go over here to Device Manager and type it in and bring it up, whoop, we can check to see what the COM port is. It says 21. So what I'm going to do is disconnect it for a second. So I'm going to go over here to the workbench. I'm going to pull this. Then I'm going to go back over to the desktop, and you can see it's gone. So let's plug it back in. And see if it actually builds again. It may have an issue, which I may have to swap in a different board, or there might be some kind of setup issue that I've created. So let's minimize this and try and send it again. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Let's see. So essentially, we have a hex file, but we have no way to load it. So maybe I made a mistake in configuration.h. So I'm going to search on motherboard and first check. Maybe this needs to be 1. And try it again. It may fail. And it does. So, options that we can do. let's try closing out of here for a second. Whoop, you can't see what I'm doing. So it failed again, so I'm gonna actually close the folder. Then I'm gonna close out of VS Code because there might be some issue with us swapping between actual ports. And let's see if this is working properly like they say. So we'll go over to Pronterface. Inside Pronterface, we'll try and connect to port 21. It might be that I also, well, I found the error. So I can't connect here. That kind of sucks. But if you look over here, I had something up. I was looking at Steve's design here. He's in the chat room, probably in Discord, if not in the chat right now. He's got a printer design for micro printing, and this is part of his design. So I'm going to close out of this because it's grabbing the actual port, and I'm actually going to reopen. Hang on a second. I'm going to reopen Pronterface and see what's going on. So you see COM port 21 because it populates by detecting it. It says connecting and it goes online. So we're going to disconnect. I'm going to reopen VS Code. Inside VS Code, we'll reopen the project because now we know what the issue is. So I'm going to go to Open Folder, Downloads, Marlin 2020, select folder. Make sure that our changes for, whoop, I love that feature. I'm going to change this back to 0. And then I'm going to try and load again with the arrow. So this will take a few seconds. So now it's beginning to load. So I'll check on the chat while that's going on because I'm pretty sure people are saying I can't see or you missed a step or something like that, but apparently it's working now. So now that it's working, we have to go back over to the desk for a second and see if we can hook this up correctly. So on the desktop, what we're going to do is we're going to first power this down. Next, we're going to grab this and examine it for a second. And over here, it says AUX1, and AUX1 is over in here as well. So that's a clue. So I'm not sure which way to put the actual ribbon cable, so I'm going to first connect it this way. If I can get it to go in. Oh, I can't get it to go in because it's 4 pins. So I've got to find a cable for that real quick. Amazing when you're looking for something that you've used before and you don't see it. And then you start seeing the pins wrong. So here we go. It's a 4-pin connector. Find AUX1. And then we have to hook up AUX1 again. So it's 4 pins over here. So I'm going to make an assumption that the notch side is out. If you see smoke, it means I assumed wrong. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm in the wrong place. So here's AUX1. Now another technique is looking at the number on the board. In this case it says 1. So now I got to try and line that up. It's lined up. So let's just check with 5 volts. See if it actually powers. It says beeping. And it says rep. So let's try it out. So I'm going to actually power up the board. Let me find the cord for it. plug this in. So this is energized now, so we're going to be very careful. We'll go over to move. We'll move the x-axis. Let's move it 10, positive. It's not moving. It's not moving over here. So it might be this display because it's so old, or I forgot to configure something. So we'll try and configure a second serial port and see what happens. So I'm going to power down the system. I'm going to leave this plugged in for the moment. Go over to VS Code. Wait for VS Code to appear. Sorry about this. Let's do it this way. And I'm going to enable the second one. Now I don't know what this is going to be or if it's going to work. So let's try uploading that and seeing what happens. Yeah, I didn't like that too much. So this may not work. This has worked in the past, so I'm guessing that it might be Marlin 1.1.9 if it works, but don't quote me on that. I'm just trying out one to see if it works. So that's loading. I'll check on the chat real quick. You guys are awfully quiet today. Okay, that's loaded. Let's see what happens. So let's go over to the desktop. On the desktop, let's plug in the power. We're still on that menu, so let's do plus. There's no change. No change. Go back. Let's do home. See if anything happens. Nothing's happening. So let's try a different version. So we're gonna have to use the 8-bit version. So I'm gonna go over to the browser for a second. If it shows up, well, we'll do it through the desktop. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Marlin fw.org. Inside here, we're going to go to download. We're going to download the version that's for 1.1.9, which is here. Pull that to the computer. This may take a few seconds, so I'm going to click over here to the downloads folder. Inside the downloads folder, it looks like it's gotten here, so I'll right click and extract all. And I'll extract. While that's going on, I'll go back over to VS Code. I'll click File, Close Folder. Then we'll check on the actual extract, which hasn't fully occurred. Now it has, so I'll close that. Go to here, open folder, downloads, Marlin 1.1, 1.1. Then we'll go to, well, we're already too deep, so let's go select folder and see what happens. This is going to be a slightly different display because it's older. So let's open the Marlin folder. Inside the Marlin folder, it's a bit of a mess, so we'll have to go over here. So inside here, we'll search on our board, which is listed down here. It's actually that one. So we don't really have to search, but now we have to find the configuration.h file. Of course, I'm going to get slightly confused because of the way they do this. We'll search on motherboard, even though it's probably there already. So that's good. It's set to one serial port, so we may not have a conflict. So the stepper driver may need to be enabled. So I'm going to search on A4988. As you can see, they disable them. So I'll remove the comment. So we're good there. So next thing that we want to do is actually try loading this. So I'm going to click on the forward arrow. This might take a few seconds. Okay, so the upload's probably going to begin in a second. This is known as the default configuration that everything else is based off of. So usually it works on the first compile. But apparently it's hanging right now. There it goes. So I'll check on the chat while that's going on. Okay, so it's almost complete. So I'm going to go back over and test this on the desktop. So I'm going to plug it back in. We're in that screen already. So let's hit the back button. Go to move, plus, and there's no movement. So it might be this display isn't set for it. So let me see if I can find another one real quick here. Or it might have something else going on that I forgot about. So let me see if I have an older display. Okay, I have an older one. Let's try this one. It's a TFT 28. So I'll unplug the system for a second. De-energize it. Pop this out. Pop this one into AUX 1. Could also be that I'm plugged in backwards on the board. We'll figure that out in a second. So in this one, it's hard to tell where it is. It says Wi-Fi in the upper right hand corner. Down here it's got a port. And this one says something about the SD drive. So I'm guessing it's right here. So let's see if it powers up and actually functions. So let's power up the system. So I'm going to disconnect this for a second and just power up the system by itself. We'll go to move, X. We'll increase that 10. And it doesn't want to move. So I'm not sure if it works on this board, but we can test it on a TMC, or excuse me, an MKS board and see if it works the same. So let's power this down and see if I've got one of those. So everything's powered down, so I'm going to disconnect the power for a second. And I may have to modify the power supply. Now, the reason I'm saying MKS Gen L is because it's the same board, just on one board. So I'm going to pop this up. Get this museum putty out of the way. And then I'm going to find the other board and see if we can do that. Oh, I wonder if this is the issue. The board was not completely seated. So we'll give this one quick try, see if it works. So when I lifted this up, the whole board came up. So that means it's not all the way squished down. So let's reconnect these real quick and see what's going on. Apparently my museum putty is now coming out like silly string, so okay. Okay. Let me secure this better. Plug this back in. Plug this back in. Powers. Let's do the regular power. Double check our connections. And here we go. Oh. Can't believe no one pointed this out. I'm not feeling too sharp. So we got to find the actual slot for this, which is right here. And I'm guessing everything's going to work a little bit better. Guessing. So when you're doing stuff live, it usually doesn't work out the way you planned. As you can see, my plan didn't work out very well. So let's increase that. And it's working. Notice how it's going the wrong direction. So if we want to write the direction on this board, what we can do is this. Power down the board. Take your connector out, which is a DuPont. Flip it 180 degrees. Slide it back in. Power the system back up. And then move 10x, and that takes care of the direction. Obviously I have no end stops connected, so I'm going to disconnect this for a second, reconnect this one and make sure it's working. So in fact it does work for these older ones on this board. These are older ones. They have 8 pins, not 5, or excuse me, not 10. So increase the step, move it 10, and so they both work. So it only doesn't work when you forget one step. So we're good there. So I hope that answered a question that someone had. I know they were watching me struggle with it for a bit, but it takes a second for me to remember on the older boards what I should and shouldn't do, and simple steps can always trip me up. But it's getting close to 7 o'clock. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? I know it's been a difficult tutorial to watch, but hopefully everything's been sorted out for today. So for the patrons out there that have been tipping, thank you very much. And for the people that are doing super chats, thank you. And I'll be online tomorrow around 3 o'clock. And for those that are wondering, next week I get my second vaccine shot. So I might not do a stream on Friday and Saturday because I've heard the second one may have issues with the body's reaction. So if I'm not online by 6 o'clock or 3 o'clock on Saturday, it's probably because I'm feeling a little tired. So for those of you that are still here, be safe, take care, and I'll catch up with you on Monday or Saturday. So be safe. Thank you.